Tour the cruise ports, Baltimore.
Table of contents, Baltimore. Dr. Sydney Soclof. drsidney22@gmail.com. 2022.
Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof,
Zoe Phonemes,
and Nathan Koltove. Introduction. This book is a brief but comprehensive overview of Baltimore, with visiting, travel, and tour information for cruise ship passengers and others.
Baltimore, with visiting, travel, and tour information. And other books in this series are based on the hundreds of destination lectures that I have presented on cruise ships to destinations all over the world. The purpose of these lectures is to add value to the experience of the passengers at the various ports. These lectures are comprehensive overviews of the geography, history, culture, points of interest, and general information about the ports, countries, and regions.
For a more complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to this video using the link here. Chapter 2. Introduction to Baltimore.
Baltimore is an independent city and the largest city in the state of Maryland. Baltimore is near the Chesapeake Bay and across from the Delmarva Peninsula. The Delmarva Peninsula consists of part of Maryland, almost all of Delaware, and a little bit of Virginia. The distance from Baltimore to Washington, D.C. is only 40 miles. This is the Baltimore, Washington metropolitan area.
Baltimore is part of the huge Baltimore, Washington metropolitan area that extends from Baltimore down to northern Virginia.
The Baltimore metropolitan area, which includes the city's surrounding areas, has approximately 2.7 million residents. It is the 20th largest in the country. Baltimore is the largest city in the Baltimore-Washington metropolitan area with approximately 8.1 million residents. This is a map of the Baltimore-Washington metropolitan area. There are these three major airports in the Baltimore-Washington metropolitan area.
Baltimore is located in north-central Maryland, along the tidal portion of the Patapsco River, which is an arm of the Chesapeake Bay. Baltimore is in north-central Maryland on the Patapsco River, close to where it empties into the Chesapeake Bay.
Baltimore is also located on the fault line between the Piedmont Plateau and the Atlantic Coastal Plain, which divides Baltimore into Lower City and Upper City. The city's elevation ranges from sea level at the harbor to 480 feet, 150 meters, in the northwest corner near Pimlico.
This is a satellite view of the Baltimore area.
This is a map of the Baltimore area.
This is a closer satellite view of the Baltimore area.
Chapter 3. Cruise Port Baltimore.
This is a map of the inner harbor and downtown area of Baltimore. This is a satellite view of the inner harbor and downtown area of Baltimore.
This is the South Locust Point Marine Terminal where cruise ships dock. This is a cruise ship docked at the South Locust Point Marine Terminal.
This is a map of the area near the South Locust Point Marine Terminal.
This is a satellite view of the area near the South Locust Point Marine Terminal.
This shows the cruise ship terminal at South Locust Point and nearby Fort McHenry.
This is a satellite view of the cruise ship terminal at South Locust Point and nearby Fort McHenry.
Baltimore is sometimes referred to as Baltimore City to distinguish it from the surrounding Baltimore County.
Founded in 1729, Baltimore is a major U.S. seaport and is situated closer to major Midwestern markets than any other major seaport on the East Coast. Baltimore's Inner Harbor was once the second leading port of entry for immigrants to the United States and a major manufacturing center.
How do you pronounce Baltimore?
For people who were born there, or are long-time residents, it's pronounced Baltimore.
The Inner Harbor is now home to the Harborplace, a shopping, entertainment, and tourist center, and the National Aquarium in Baltimore.
After a decline in manufacturing industries, Baltimore shifted to a service sector-oriented economy. Johns Hopkins University and Johns Hopkins Hospital are now the city's largest employers.
Chapter 4. Johns Hopkins University.
Johns Hopkins University is a private research university in Baltimore named after Johns Hopkins, who left $7 million in his 1873 will for the foundation of the university and Johns Hopkins Hospital. At the time, this was the largest philanthropic bequest in U.S. history, the equivalent of over $130 million today. Johns Hopkins University was founded in 1876. And now has an enrollment of 5,000 undergraduates and 14,000 graduate students.
Johns Hopkins performed $2.3 billion in science, medical and engineering research in the fiscal year 2015. The National Science Foundation has ranked the university #1 among U.S. academic institutions in total research and development spending for the 30th year in a row.
The Johns Hopkins Hospital is the teaching hospital and biomedical research facility of the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine.
The Johns Hopkins Hospital and the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine are the founding institutions of modern American medicine, and are the birthplace of numerous traditions including rounds, residents, and house staff.
Johns Hopkins Hospital is the birthplace of many medical specialties including neurosurgery, urology, endocrinology, pediatrics, cardiac surgery, and child psychiatry.
Johns Hopkins Hospital has been ranked by U.S. News & World Report as the best overall hospital in America for 19 consecutive years.
According to the 2010 census, the racial and ethnic breakdown of the city was Black, 64%, White non-Hispanic, 28%, Hispanic 4%, Asian, 2.3%, and biracial 2%. Chapter 5. The History of Baltimore. The Maryland Colonial General Assembly created the Port of Baltimore at Locust Point in 1706 for the tobacco trade.
The town of Baltimore was founded in 1729 and is named after Lord Baltimore, Cecilius Calvert, who was the first proprietary governor of the province of Maryland. Cecilius Calvert was a son of George Calvert, who became the first Lord Baltimore of County Cork, Ireland in 1625. Baltimore grew swiftly in the 18th century as a granary for sugar-producing colonies in the Caribbean. The profit from sugar encouraged the cultivation of cane and the importation of food. Baltimore's shorter distance from the Caribbean, compared to other large port cities such as New York City and Boston, reduced transportation time and minimized the spoilage of flour. Baltimore played a key part in events leading to and including the American Revolution. Congress moved to Baltimore, Maryland, a safer haven during the war than Philadelphia, after the Declaration of Independence.
Congress met in this rented building, known as Old Congress House, from December 1776 to February 1777, effectively making the city the capital of the United States during this period.
In 1800, Baltimore was the third largest city in the U.S., after Philadelphia and New York City, in the 1840 census. Baltimore was still among the top 4 cities.
Chapter 6. Fort McHenry and the Battle of Baltimore.
Baltimore and Fort McHenry were the sites of the Battle of Baltimore during the War of 1812. After burning Washington, D.C., the British attacked Baltimore on the night of September 13, 1814. United States forces from Fort McHenry successfully defended the city's harbor from the British. Fort McHenry guarded the entrance to Baltimore Harbor via the Patapsco River and thus faced almost certain attack by British forces. Major George Armistead, the stronghold's commander, was so confident that he could defend the fort that he wanted a flag whose size would be visible to the enemy from a distance. A committee of high-ranking officers called on Mary Young Pickersgill, a Baltimore widow who had had experience making ship flags, and explained that they wanted a United States flag that measured 30 feet by 42 feet. She agreed to the job.
With the help of her 13-year-old daughter, Caroline, Mrs. Pickersgill spent several weeks measuring, cutting, and sewing the 15 stars and stripes. When the time came to sew the elements of the flag together, they realized that their house was not large enough.
Mrs. Pickersgill thus asked the owner of nearby Claggett's Brewery for permission to assemble the flag on the building's floor during evening hours. He agreed, and the women worked by candlelight to finish it. Once completed, the flag was delivered to the committee, and Mrs. Pickersgill was paid $405.90.
In August 1813, the flag was presented to Major Armistead. But, as things turned out, more than a year would pass before hostile forces threatened Baltimore.
After capturing Washington, D.C., and burning some of its public buildings, the British headed for Baltimore.
On the morning of September 13, 1814, British bomb ships began hurling high-trajectory shells toward Fort McHenry from positions beyond the reach of the fort's guns. The bombardment continued throughout the rainy night.
Francis Scott Key was a Washington, D.C. lawyer who had visited the British fleet to secure the release of a Maryland doctor who had been abducted by the British after they left Washington. Key was on a ship 8 miles downstream from Fort McHenry. He had been successful in his mission, but he could leave the ship until the attack ended.
During the night, there had been only occasional sounds of the fort's guns returning fee. At dawn, the British bombardment tapered off. Had the fort been captured?
Key looked through a telescope and saw the large flag still flying. He was thrilled by the sight of the flag and the knowledge that the fort had not fallen.
Key took a letter from his pocket and began to write some verses on the back of it.
Later, after the British fleet had withdrawn, Key checked into a Baltimore hotel, completed his poem, and sent it to a printer for duplication on handbills.
Within a few days, the poem was put to the music of an old English song. Both the new song and the flag became known as the Star-Spangled Banner. The Star-Spangled Banner became the official national anthem of the United States in 1931. The American defense of Baltimore's Fort McHenry in this battle thus inspired Francis Scott Key to compose the poem, which would become the national anthem of the United States, the Star-Spangled Banner.
This is the battle monument that commemorates the Battle of Baltimore. Following the Battle of Baltimore, the city's population grew rapidly. the construction of the federally funded National Road, presently U.S. Route 40, and the private Baltimore and Ohio Railroad (B&O) made Baltimore a major shipping and manufacturing center. By linking the city with major markets in the Midwest, a distinctive local culture started to take shape, and a unique skyline developed, peppered with churches and monuments.
Baltimore acquired its title of Monument City after an 1827 visit to Baltimore by President John Quincy Adams. At an evening function, Adams gave the following toast: "Baltimore, the monumental city. May the days of her safety be as prosperous and happy as the days of her dangers have been trying and triumphant." Maryland did not secede during the American Civil War, but remained a part of the United States. However, when Union soldiers marched through the city at the start of the war, Confederate sympathizers attacked the troops, which led to the Baltimore riot of 1861.
4 soldiers and 12 civilians were killed during the riot, which caused Union troops to occupy Baltimore. Maryland came under direct federal administration, in part, to prevent the state from seceding. This lasted until the end of the war in April 1865.
Following an economic depression known as the Panic of 1873, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Company attempted to reduce its workers' wages, leading to the Great Railroad Strike of 1877.
In February 1904, the Great Baltimore Fire destroyed over 1,500 buildings in 30 hours, and forced most of the city to rebuild.
2 years later, on September 10, 1906, the Baltimore American newspaper reported that the city had risen from the ashes, and one of the great disasters of modern time had been converted into a blessing. In July 2001, the city center was virtually shut down for a few days by the Howard Street tunnel fee caused by a train derailment.
Chapter 7. Baltimore Points of Interest.
This is a map of the Baltimore area.
This is a map of the Baltimore area.
Most of Baltimore's points of interest are located in the Inner Harbor area, or close to the downtown area near the Inner Harbor.
This is a map of the Inner Harbor and downtown area.
Chapter 8. Inner Harbor and Harborplace.
Baltimore is one of America's oldest seaports dating from the 1600s. The Inner Harbor and Harborplace is today an important landmark and popular tourist destination. Harborplace is a bustling complex of eateries, stores, museums, entertainment, and children's attractions. Fresh seafood is available right out of Chesapeake Bay.
During the 1970s, Baltimore's downtown area known as the Inner Harbor had been neglected and was only occupied by a collection of abandoned warehouses.
Efforts to redevelop the downtown area started with the construction of the Baltimore Convention Center, which opened in 1979.
Harborplace, an urban retail and restaurant complex, opened on the waterfront in 1980. This was followed by the National Aquarium in Baltimore, Maryland's largest tourist destination, and the Baltimore Museum of Industry in 1981.
Harborplace is composed of two two-story pavilions: the Pratt Street Pavilion
and the Light Street Pavilion.
The third part of the Harborplace complex, located across Pratt Street from the harbor, is a 4-story glass-enclosed building known as the Gallery at Harborplace.
The Gallery at Harborplace opened in 1987 and is attached to Baltimore's Renaissance Hotel. Each of these buildings contains dozens of stores and restaurants.
This is a map showing the Light Street Pavilion and Pratt Street Pavilion areas of Harborplace. This is a satellite view of the Light Street Pavilion and Pratt Street Pavilion areas of Harborplace. Close by Harborplace is the Baltimore Visitors Center, just south of the Light Street Pavilion, and the Baltimore World Trade Center just to the east of the Light Street Pavilion.
There is an observatory on the 27th floor of the Baltimore World Trade Center for a great view of the Inner Harbor and the downtown Baltimore area.
Also close by Harborplace is the National Aquarium and ships of the Baltimore Maritime Museum, including the historic U.S. frigate Constellation, the USS Torsk, and the lightship Chesapeake.
Chapter 9. Inner Harbor Water Taxi.
A convenient, relaxing, and fun way to visit the many attractions in the Inner Harbor area is the Inner Harbor Water Taxi.
The Inner Harbor Water Taxi is a hop-on, hop-off boat with 17 stops in the Inner Harbor and costs $9 for an all-day ticket. These are the stops or landings in the area near Harborplace and the National Aquarium.
Without the stops at Fells Point and Fort McHenry.
This is the entire route map of the water taxi. The water taxi lands at Fort McHenry in season only, from April through September.
The water taxi runs from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, November through the end of March, with lunch hours the rest of the year.
These are the stops or landings in the area near Landing 1 and the National Aquarium.
Chapter 10. The National Aquarium.
Landing 1-Aquarium. The National Aquarium was opened in 1981 and was constructed during Baltimore's urban renewal period.
The National Aquarium has an annual attendance of 1.6 million to see its collection of 16,500 specimens of 560 different species. The National Aquarium in Baltimore is widely considered to be one of the best in the United States, if not the world.
Particular attractions include the dolphin display, rooftop rainforest, central ray pool, and the multiple-story shark tank. The National Aquarium is one of the most popular tourist attractions in the state of Maryland.
The National Aquarium in Baltimore is not to be confused with the National Aquarium in Washington, D.C. However, the National Aquarium in Washington, D.C. has been operated by the National Aquarium in Baltimore since 2003.
Chapter 11. The Baltimore Maritime Museum.
The Baltimore Maritime Museum is a museum that consists of 3 ships anchored in the Inner Harbor, as well as a transplanted lighthouse,
a Coast Guard cutter, World War II submarine, and floating lighthouse ship. All have their own stories and provide a fascinating glimpse into the daily lives of 20th century sailors.
This shows the location of the Baltimore Maritime Museum and the National Aquarium. This is a satellite view of the Baltimore Maritime Museum and National Aquarium. The Baltimore Maritime Museum is a maritime museum located in the Inner Harbor. The museum's collection includes 3 historic museum ships and 1 lighthouse. The USCGC Taney, a Coast Guard cutter. The USS Torsk, a World War II-era submarine. The lightship Chesapeake.
And the 7-foot No lighthouse. All 3 ships are listed on the National Register of Historic Places and the National Historic Landmarks.
Chapter 12. The Star-Spangled Banner House.
The Star-Spangled Banner Flag House is the home of Mary Pickers Gill, the woman who soared a U.S. flag during the War of 1812, inspiring the famous Francis Scott Key poem that became the American national anthem. The Star-Spangled Banner Flag House is located in the Little Italy section of Baltimore, close to the Inner Harbor and the National Aquarium. This is a satellite view of the Star-Spangled Banner Flag House, near the Inner Harbor and the National Aquarium.
Was to be known as the Star-Spangled Banner Flag House was built in 1793. It was the home of Mary Pickers Gill when she moved to Baltimore in 1806.
And the location where she sewed the Star-Spangled Banner. This was the flag that flew over Fort McHenry in the summer of 1814, during the Battle of Baltimore in the War of 1812. The museum contains furniture and antiques from the period, as well as items from the Pickers Gill family. The house was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1969.
A museum constructed next to Pickers Gill's house has exhibits on the War of 1812 and the Battle of Baltimore. It has an orientation theater, tea room, gift shop, exhibit galleries, and meeting rooms.
The museum features a 30 by 42 foot, 13 meters, tall window which was created to be the same color, size, and design as the original Star-Spangled Banner made by Pickers Gill in the adjacent flag house.
Chapter 13. Harborplace.
Landing to Harborplace has activity everywhere, including shopping, Maryland seafood, Baltimore history aboard the frigate ship, and historic walking tours.
Attractions near landing to include Baltimore Heritage Walk, the Boheme Cafe, Jeppy's Entertainment Museum, M&S Grill, Phillips Seafood Restaurants, USS Constellation and historic ships in Baltimore, Oriole Park at Camden Yards, 3 blocks away, and the Baltimore Visitor Center.
These are the stops or landings in the area near Landing 1.
Chapter 14. The USS Constellation Museum.
The USS Constellation Museum. Launched in 1854, the USS Constellation served her country for 100 years before the final decommissioning in 1955. Before the Civil War, she sailed as flagship of the U.S. African Squadron intercepting slave ships. During the Civil War, the Constellation was charged with chasing Confederate raiders. She then served as a training ship for midshipmen at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis from 1871 to 1893. The Constellation was brought to Baltimore in 1955 for restoration. Today, the USS Constellation Museum offers a wide range of activities and demonstrations, which provide visitors with a first-hand experience of what life was like on a 19th-century man of war.
Landing 3 Maryland Science Center. The Maryland Science Center, located in Baltimore's Inner Harbor, opened to the public in 1976. It includes 3 levels of exhibits, a planetarium, and an observatory.
These are the stops or landings in the area near Landing 3, the Science Center. The Maryland Science Center was one of the original structures that drove the revitalization of the Baltimore Inner Harbor, from its industrial roots to a thriving downtown destination. This is a satellite view of Harborplace and the Maryland Science Center.
Hands-on exhibits at the Maryland Science Center include more than 24 dinosaur skeletons. Subjects that the center displays include physical science, space, earth science, the human body, and blue crabs that are native to the Chesapeake Bay.
Landing for the American Visionary Art Museum and the Rusty Scupper Restaurant are both at Landing 4.
The American Visionary Art Museum is a fabulous museum of folk art done by untrained and self-taught artists. It is very much different than any other art museum. These are the stops or landings in the area near Landing 4.
After raising $7 million in 6 years from donors, The museum was opened to the public in 1995. This is a satellite view of the area around Landing 4 and the American Visionary Art Museum.
The American Visionary Art Museum has been designated by Congress as America's National Museum for Self-Taught Art.
The museum has no staff curators, preferring to use guest curators for its shows, and does not focus on specific artists or styles.
At Landing 4, the Rusty Scupper restaurant is a seafood restaurant with exceptional waterfront views.
Landing 5-Pi 5 is the gateway to Little Italy. Located near is the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture, and McCormick and Schmick's Restaurant.
Little Italy is easily accessible from both Landing 5 and Landing 7. Little Italy is home to generations of Italian Americans who still sit on their stoops and greet you as you pass by.
Experience a taste of La Dolce Vita while exploring the tiny streets. La Scala Ristorante is an intimate, cozy setting with a full range of Italian delights, and even has an indoor bocce ball court.
Landing 7-Harbour East. Harbour East is a new, planned, urban residential and commercial development with many choices of glorious, top-rated restaurants, upscale shopping, and a movie theater complex.
Also, near Harbour East is the Katyn Memorial, a 47-foot bronze sculpture dedicated to Polish officers killed during World War II. Landing 8, the Frederick Douglass, Isaac Myers Marine Railway and Maritime Park. Also, near Landing 8, is the historic Thames Street, and the western edge of Fells Point shops and restaurants. Landing 8 is part of the express route. The landing is only open during museum hours. This is a map showing Landing 8, Maritime Park. The Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Park, with the Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Museum, is a National Heritage Site that highlights African American maritime history.
The Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Museum tells the story of Frederick Douglass's life in Baltimore as an enslaved child and young man. The also exhibits on the life of Isaac Myers, a free-born African American who became a national leader.
The Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Park also has exhibits about the establishment of the African American community in Baltimore during the 1800s,
and the founding of the Chesapeake Marine Railway and Dry Dock Company, and the shipbuilding traditions of the Chesapeake Bay.
Landing 10- The landing features Tide Point and the Hull Street entrance to the neighborhood of Locust Point. Tide Point is a renovated complex of the old Procter & Gamble plant transformed into a state-of-the-art business facility. Locust Point is a historic, blue-collar, working-class neighborhood that is becoming one of Baltimore's trendiest areas.
Landing 10. From Tide Point it is possible, especially on a fine weather day, to walk to Fort McHenry, approximately 1 mile each way.
LP Steamers is located on Fort Avenue, about a 6-block walk. LP Steamers has great crabs and crab cakes, together with local, down-home hospitality.
Landing 11, Fells Point. The neighborhood of historic Fells Point has many restaurants, pubs, live music, antiques, collectibles, one-of-a-kind shops, history, and theaters. Fells Point is Baltimore's original deep-water seaport.
The restored 18th and 19th century row homes at Fells Point evoke the spirit of seamen and shipbuilders long departed, and the immigrants who arrived seeking freedom and fortune.
Landing 11, Fells Point. There are more than 25 pubs, eateries, cafes, and fine restaurants here. Local shops offer everything from baby toys to jewelry, surf studs, vintage vestments, and furniture. The Seafarer's Walk goes through Fells Point to Harbor East. Landing 11 is a transfer for both the express route and the Far East route. Transfers to the Far East route to Fort McHenry must be made before 3:30 p.m. Fells Point was founded in 1730 by William Fell, a Quaker carpenter from Lancashire, England. The neighborhood's main claim to fame was its multitude of shipyards dedicated to the production of the famous Baltimore clipper ship.
Today, Fells Point is an upscale business and residential neighborhood with quaint cobblestone streets. They are actually made of Belgian blocks, and many shops, restaurants, and taverns.
Landing 14 Captain James Landing. Transfer at Landing 11 to get to Landing 14. Captain James is a ship-shaped restaurant that offers steamed crabs on the dock in season, Baltimore style, breakfast all day, and almost every variety of food. This shows the location of Landing 14 Captain James Landing. Landing 14 is the border between Fells Point and Canton, the gateway to food and entertainment in these two unique neighborhoods. Walk east on Boston Street, or along the promenade, to view the new urban redevelopment.
And also, the Can Company shops and eateries, boats, and gorgeous views.
Landing 16 Canton Waterfront Park. Transfer at Landing 11 to get to Landing 16.
Near Landing 16 is the Canton Waterfront Park, the Korean War Memorial, and O'Donnell Square. Up the hill through Canton is the square named for Captain John O'Donnell.
There are some unique local shops, bars, and restaurants on O'Donnell Square, and a view across the river of Fort McHenry.
Chapter 15. Fort McHenry.
Landing 17 Fort McHenry. This is the landing for Fort McHenry National Monument and Historic Shrine. Water taxis land here only in season, April through September, weather permitting. The star-shaped Fort McHenry and beautiful waterfront grounds preserve the sacred place where Baltimore soldiers saved the Union from the British invasion by the sea. During the War of 1812, Fort McHenry is where the national anthem was first written by a Baltimore lawyer, Francis Scott Key, during the Great Bombardment. It is a sacred ground where a battle was fought to save the young nation.
Chapter 16. The Mount Vernon Neighborhood.
The Mount Vernon neighborhood is Baltimore's cultural heart. It is located less than a mile north of the Inner Harbor.
This shows the location of the Mount Vernon neighborhood. Charles Street leads directly from the Harborplace at the Inner Harbor up to the Washington Monument in the Mount Vernon neighborhood.
Mount Vernon is home to the Meyerhoff Symphony Hall, the Peabody Conservatory of Music, and the Walters Art Museum.
This is a map of the Mount Vernon neighborhood. Just on the outskirts of the Mount Vernon neighborhood is the Howard Street Antique District.
This is a satellite view of the Mount Vernon neighborhood.
Chapter 17. Washington Monument.
Baltimore's Washington Monument predates the more famous one in Washington, D.C. by more than 50 years. It is, in fact, the first one in the country. The marble tower rises 178 feet from the highest point in Baltimore. The one in D.C. is 555 feet tall.
10 years after George Washington died in 1799, a group of citizens organized a lottery to raise $100,000 for a monument in Baltimore. Robert Mills, who later became the architect of the other Washington Monument, won the commission to design Baltimore's tribute to Washington.
Begun in 1815, the grandiose design was scaled back several times before its completion in 1829. A Doric column rising from a square base. The monument is topped with a statue of Washington in a Roman toga. At one time, ships entering the harbor could see the monument, which is only 10 blocks from the inner harbor. Today downtown skyscrapers block the vista.
Visitors can climb its 228 steps for a view of the city from a small observation area.
In the base, there is a small museum that chronicles the history of the monument. Admission is $1.
Chapter 18. Walters Art Museum.
The Walters Art Museum is internationally renowned for its collection of art. Hours of operation for the museum are Wednesday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. This shows the location of the Walters Museum. This is a satellite view of the area around the Walters Museum. The collection in the Walters Museum spans 55 centuries and presents an overview of world art from pre-dynastic Egypt to 20th century Europe, and also has Greek sculpture, Roman sarcophagi, medieval ivories, old master paintings, Art Deco jewelry, and 19th century European and American masterpieces.
Chapter 19. Baltimore Basilica.
The Basilica of the National Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, also called the Baltimore Basilica, was the first Roman Catholic cathedral built in the United States. The Basilica of the National Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary was the first major religious building constructed in the nation after the adoption of the U.S. Constitution.
As a co-cathedral, it is one of the two seats of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Baltimore. It is considered to be the masterpiece of Benjamin Henry Latrobe, the father of American architecture.
Benjamin Henry Bonneville Latrobe, 1764 to 1820, was a British-born American architect. He is best known for his design of the United States Capitol, as well as his design of the Baltimore Basilica, the first Catholic cathedral built in the United States. This shows the location of the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
This is a satellite view of the area around the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Chapter 20. Maryland Historical Society.
The Maryland Historical Society houses a priceless collection of more than 200,000 objects. This museum displays a significant number of Maryland cultural artifacts plus items such as dolls and toys that provide a glimpse of everyday life in Maryland. This shows the location of the Maryland Historical Society.
This is a satellite view of the area around the Maryland Historical Society.
The Maryland Historical Society was founded in 1844. It is the oldest cultural institution in the state of Maryland. The Maryland Historical Society collects, preserves, and interprets objects and materials reflecting Maryland's diverse heritage. The Society has a museum, library, holds educational programs, and publishes scholarly works on Maryland.
Chapter 21. Other sites in Baltimore.
In 1992, the Baltimore Orioles baseball team moved from Memorial Stadium to Oriole Park at Camden Yards, located downtown, a few blocks west of the Inner Harbor. Oriole Park at Camden Yards was completed in 1992 to replace Memorial Stadium. It is the home field of the Baltimore Orioles of Major League Baseball.
It was the first of the retro Major League ballparks constructed during the 1990s and early 2000s, and remains one of the most highly praised. It has a capacity of 49,000.
6 years later, the Baltimore Ravens football team moved into M&T Bank Stadium next to Camden Yards.
The Legg Mason Building is the tallest in Baltimore. This tower is a prominent landmark near downtown Baltimore, and was on one corner of the former Bromo-Seltzer plant. This is the Baltimore City Hall.
Chapter 22. B&O Railroad Museum.
The B&O Railroad Museum is located at the site of the oldest railroad station in America. It traces the development of trains and features a very extensive collection of railroad memorabilia, a model railroad,
and an operating replica of the very first locomotive, the Tom Thumb, which was built here. The B&O Railroad Museum is located among Baltimore City's historic southwest neighborhoods, at the original site of the historic Mount Clair Shops. It is recognized as the birthplace of American railroading.
It was here, within the museum's 40-acre campus, that Baltimore businessmen, surveyors, and engineers set about building the B&O Railroad in 1829, laying the first commercial long-distance track, building the first passenger station, and inventing America's unique railroad.
Railroad work has been conducted at Mount Clair for over 130 years, and it continues today.
The B&O Railroad Museum collects, preserves, and interprets artifacts related to early American railroading,
particularly the Baltimore and Ohio, Chesapeake and Ohio, Western Maryland, and the Mid-Atlantic Railroads, and welcomes over 200,000 visitors a year. This is the B&O Railroad Museum. George Herman Babe Ruth was born in 1895 at 216 Emory Street, in a Baltimore row house that is now just a long flyball from Oriole Park at Camden Yards. Babe Ruth, the city's native son, known as the Great Bambino, is celebrated in the house he was born in that is now a museum. It is stocked with memorabilia like the catcher's mitt he used while learning baseball, the bat from his famed 1927 season, and exhibits honoring the Orioles.
Chapter 23. Baltimore Museum of Art.
The Baltimore Museum of Art is one of the most prestigious art museums in the U.S. It was founded in 1914 and is immediately adjacent to the Homewood campus of Johns Hopkins University, although the museum is an independent institution not affiliated with the university.
The highlight of the museum is the Cone Collection, brought together by Baltimore sisters, Clarabelle and Etta Cone.
The Cone Collection has works by Matisse, Picasso, Cezanne, Monet, Gauguin, Van Gogh and Renoir.
This shows the location of the Baltimore Museum of Art. The Baltimore Museum of Art and the Walters Art Museum have free admission year-round, as a result of grants given by Baltimore City and Baltimore County, except for special exhibitions. The Elton Head Manor Room is one of 6 rooms at the Baltimore Museum of Art that replicates a historic Maryland house.
Chapter 24. The climate of Baltimore. Will it be hot, or will it be cold in Baltimore?
Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Baltimore. Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Baltimore. The daytime temperatures in the summer months are very warm, 85 degrees Fahrenheit or 28 degrees Celsius. At night, the temperatures drop to a more comfortable 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 16 to 18 degrees Celsius.
The daytime temperatures in the winter months are chilly, 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit or 5 to 15 degrees Celsius. At night, the temperatures drop to a cold 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 to -5 degrees Celsius.
Here is a line graph of the average temperatures in Baltimore. Rainfall in Baltimore. Here is the average precipitation in inches throughout the year in Baltimore. The total yearly rainfall is 42 inches, or 1,064 millimeters.
Here is the average precipitation in millimeters throughout the year in Baltimore.
Here is the average number of days per month with precipitation throughout the year in Baltimore. We see that it rains about 9 days every month throughout the year.
Here is a line graph of the average precipitation in Baltimore.
Chapter 25. Recommended videos, Baltimore.
Recommended video, Fort McHenry.
Recommended video, visit Baltimore, Maryland, USA. Things to do in Baltimore, the city of firsts. Recommended video, the Battle of Fort McHenry. Through Francis Scott Key's eyes, Smithsonian Channel. Recommended video, the Defense of Fort McHenry, Smithsonian Channel. Yahoo2.be web link 138. Recommended video, Tour Baltimore's Inner Harbor Travel Channel. Table of Contents, Baltimore.
Thanks for watching.